Okay, so we have our very basic material created. I'm just going to go in and delete the empty layer one that's always created. Not a bad habit to get into, but going in and just naming these things. So that's my base fill. This is dirt, and this is chipped. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to be creating are two layers where the detail is going to live. And in order for the anchoring system to work, these need to be on the bottommost layer. Well, not so much the bottommost layer, they need to be underneath whatever layers are going to use this information. So it's just a easy thing to remember. I tend to just drop them on the basemost layer. So this first one, we're going to be dealing with height. And actually, let's just call it height detail so we know what it is we're doing. And so all we need on this one is actually just the height information. And you can choose to have it going out or in. For this example, I'm going to do a dug in a bit. And then we're adding the black mass to it. So now just set up the way we have it. I paint in here and it's giving me a dug in look. But we can immediately see that illusion isn't very effective because our dirt is ignoring it, our chipped edges are ignoring it, and so it is there. We can see it when we move the light around and it looks pretty convincing, but since all of the detail layers and all of the extra things that we've added after the fact are not paying attention to it, and that's a humongous tell that this information in here is not real, and so we want to address that. So what we need to do is we're going to right click on the black mask and add an anchor point. So by default what it's going to do is take whatever the name of this is and put it in the anchor point name. And so now that we have an anchor point, what we need to do is go in and make sure that each of these masks are paying attention to it. So I'm clicking on the generator that is being applied to the black mask. And it's easy to find. Just scroll all the way to the bottom. And what we're looking to link it to is what's called micro height. There's an extra tab here for anchor points, and we only have the one, so we can see that it's that one. And then we're going to leave that. So the next part of it, so it's always a two-stage, we need to assign it here, and then we need to go to micro details and turn that micro height on. And we can already see it's doing something for sure, but we can kind of see that it's not doing a very good something. So by default, what's happening here is it's looking at the height information I've provided, and it's doing what the dirt is doing, and that is sucking into crevices. So by default, it believes that this layer is punching out. So if I were to actually go back into this layer and go, okay, we don't want to dig in, we actually want to have it punched out, we can see that this actually, the way it did it, this makes sense. This is digging into these crevices, the places where I made the punching out detail, and the dirt is sucking in to the edges around. But that's not what we want. We're looking for, we've decided that we want to have it dug in. So the way we change this is we go back up to our dirt. And so where we've told it to look for this height detail, we actually have the ability to go into the levels. And one of the most common uses for levels is to do an invert. And also, while we're here, let me just drag this out so you can see the whole thing, is we have the ability to affect our levels and seeing at how that affects the look of our dirt. So we can kind of dial this in as well to where we want it. But the important part is knowing that we can invert it, and that's a 1-to-1. So if you're doing dug in detail, it's going to need to be inverted. If it's punched out detail, then you're fine. So we want to do the same thing to the metal edge wear. Down to the bottom, micro height, going to the anchor points tab, clicking it. We already know that we need to invert it, so we might as well do it while we're here. And then going to the micro details tab, remember, just above where all of the texture information is, and turning that height on. So now we can see that it's going to take a look at what we've kind of called a high edge and then chip that paint away, and then seeing how that kind of looks. And this effect becomes even better when we actually do something a little less phoned in. So we go to our alphas and then we decide, let's see what's cool. Sure, this looks good enough. Clicking on the actual black mask. And then going in here and punching some details. I'll put something really big in here. Okay. And while we're here, we might as well address this issue. So as we're moving our brush around, by default, what it's trying to do is align itself with the normals of this object. So here it looks fine. So as we go around this corner, you can see it kind of turning and shifting around here. If it's a nice big flat area, we can kind of see it's sort of doing it here, but I find, especially on a hard surface object like this, the default is not great. So what we want to do, so as long as we have our black mask selected, that means our properties down here are going to be for the brush itself. Because as we can see, we've got the alpha, that's the alpha there. And what we're doing is looking to go more towards the top. And the alignment, by default, it's a tangent wrap. What I prefer to do is what's called camera. And so what it does is it aligns with the camera, and it doesn't care about trying to figure out where those faces are. So I can actually punch it down in and have a much stronger idea of where it's going to go. Of course, the downside of this thing is that it is looking through the lens of the camera, so it is not aligning these things up. And if you get particularly good with it, or at least get used to it, you can kind of do some different effects with it. So if I go here and then punch straight through and kind of doing something along these lines. Okay, so in the next video we're going to be looking at doing this same thing but for the normal maps.